Sonic the Hedgehog used to be cool. He's on your lunchbox, he's doing snowboarding tricks. Sonic was Sega's answer to Mario. The blue blur with an attitude was the epitome of cool. But somewhere along the line, something happened. Something cringeworthy. Because today when you say Sonic, people don't think about classic Sonic or the video games. They think about whatever these abominations are.
I am Christian Weston.
Since the dawn of fandom, Sonic has taken a weird turn. In the last few decades, we went down kind of a weird path, so I wanted to look at what exactly happened to our intrepid Hedgehog hero. Why was this franchise more vocal and special than others? Did the internet ruin him, or was this just another case of a fandom gone awry? For as long as I've been a Sonic fan, I've seen countless people dismiss the fanbase as just people who make fetish material, Deviantart OCs, or a ton of weird vocal fans.
Your fantasies can't ever be quenched!
The stigma Sonic fans face is real, but there are so many wonderfully talented people in this niche. However, people only ever focus on the weird. I wanted to take a look today at the weird, why it's weird, and how did it get weird. I wanted to see how the internet took Sonic by the quills and made him this way. Let's set the scene. It's the early 90s, and Sega releases Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis. He's new, he's blue, and he has an attitude. For some kids, Mario just wasn't cool, so Sonic really did scratch that itch. Kids would doodle him in their notebooks, pretend to be him on the playgrounds, and get all Sonic paraphernalia banned in Mrs. Green's 3rd grade class because you just had to start an argument over Sonic lore so intense that the teachers had to step in. Good times. We also had the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons. One of the cartoons, simply titled Sonic the Hedgehog, introduced a lot of casual fans who didn't have the comics to Princess Sally Acorn, which was an awakening of sorts for some. Not me, of course. Not me. Anyway, let's move on to what happened to the fandom in the 2000s. If you were online in the early 2000s, you probably saw Sonic everywhere. Forums, fanfiction, newgrounds, you could not escape him. The Sonic fandom became one of the most active and infamous fandoms on the web. You had art, you had the shipping, you had the OCs, the original characters, and there were so many of them. Seriously, there are so many that if you Google your name, the Hedgehog, you're most likely going to get some kind of result. See, let's do mine. Sonic OCs are a lot like Rule 34, but instead, if it exists, there was a Sonic OC of it. No, seriously. Sonic's long-lost siblings, girlfriends, brothers, cousins, edgy counterparts, dogs, and it didn't stop there. There was literally Sonic of basically everything. Sonic Goku, Sonic Garfield, Sonic Jesus, Sonic Pokemon. I'll get to that here in a minute. When these palette swap clones started showing up all over the internet, at least more frequently, this was kind of the beginning of the DeviantArt era for Sonic the Hedgehog. A golden age, as it were, of unfiltered fandom expression, and the catalyst where the Sonic franchise, in my opinion, stopped being just a game and became a lifestyle and a meme all at once. Also, it gets kind of weird.
What is this? Get off! What is this?
DeviantArt, for those who don't know, I mean, if you don't know what DeviantArt is, it's kind of weird you're in this portion of the internet with me, but for those who don't know, it's a site for artists to come together and share their art. What started out as a fun site to show off your creativity, you know, things of like your favorite characters doing epic poses or what Super Saiyan 15 would look like, had quickly spiraled into a thriving chaotic mess. And a lot of times when people think of DeviantArt, they think of weird Sonic art. While many of the Sonic OCs and fan art were really just harmless and creative, the sheer volume of them became like a running joke online. To outsiders, the fandom looked oversaturated and unapproachable. This reputation would later shape how the broader internet saw Sonic. Some of the reason why Sonic OCs in general were so popular was that they represented something far more than just simple doodles or indulgent fantasies. They were a unique expression of identity and giving oneself power and control. The characters are also easy to take in, with their bright colors and exaggerated personalities to create a visually and narratively clear world that is easier to engage with, so people would continue to make art of them. Some characters were also exceedingly easy to draw, making it a prime starting area for burgeoning artists. The community would have tons of people willing to help, critique, and assist other artists. Like any fandom, there were bad sides, especially here in the art side of the Sonic fandom. A lot of discourse of if a recolor of something counts as an OC, people saying they own certain designs, and of course, straight up stealing. It's where the whole original character do not steal saying came from. Now, while there were edgelords, shitposters, and people making immortal, overpowered Mary Sue characters, a lot of the works you would see on the daily was just kids trying to show an identity. People trying to show you that they exist and express what they are through art. People trying to have a little escapism as a treat from their lives or trying to express freedom, but the amount of OCs born made the scene crowded and, from the outside looking in, kinda cringe. And that opinion would only get worse by the release of a certain entry in the franchise in the mid-2000s. By the mid-2000s, the franchise had already been transitioned into the 3D style for some time. Quite successfully, I might add, with Sonic Adventures 1 and 2 being massive hits, especially 2 considering that it added everyone's favorite Linkin Park listening, moody, edgy Hedgehog Shadow to the cast. However, by 2006, Sega would release a game so bad it's still made fun of to this day. A game simply titled Sonic the Hedgehog, or as the fans like to call it, Sonic.Exe. A game that was meant to be the next-gen reboot of the series for Team Sonic, but due to pressure from Sega and the higher-ups to get this out on the shelves by holiday season, they put out an incomplete game with a ton of bugs. Like, a lot of bugs. A lot of bugs and a lot of glitches. There are so many glitches, in fact, that you can easily just look up Sonic.Exe glitch compilations for a good giggle. If it wasn't before, with this half-assed return, the franchise definitely became a laughingstock. It didn't necessarily kill the franchise, but it didn't do any favors for the reputation of this IP. Oh yeah, let's also not forget this bizarre cutscene. Look, I've repeatedly refuted the furry allegations, and I will continue to do so. But it's hard to defend being a Sonic fan when, for a while, that was canon. Another thing I think that preemptively doomed Sonic.Exe, or at least dug its grave a little deeper, was that this was around the time of the rise of meme culture, and sites like 4chan were starting to see surges in their initial push in popularity. So Sonic.Exe really never stood a chance. The internet amplifies every flaw. A bad game can become a cultural event, and for years, Sonic's reputation never really recovered from the tragedy that was Sonic.Exe. I'm going to let imaginary friend of the channel, James Rolfe, give you kind of the idea of the sentiment of how people felt about the game at the time.
Everyone calls it Sonic.Exe, but I call it Sonic-O fucking piece of shit!
Now, we're starting to get an idea of what kind of crowd was attracted to the series, and not just that, why it may have turned out that way. Why cringe became the culture. I'm going to say the first group of people that come to mind when you think of weird Sonic fans. Furries. Sonic the Hedgehog franchise was always destined to become a nexus for the furry fandom since the series is built around anthropomorphic characters. Now, did furries exist before Sonic? Yes. Did a lot of new furries cut their teeth and make discoveries because of Sonic? Also yes. Is there a small percentage of people who are furries who have bad intentions, are deviants, or just weird, so the internet zooms in directly on them that are part of the Sonic fandom? Definitely. The issue is, while most furries and furry communities are awesome, wholesome, and have a wonderfully creative community, back in the late 2000s and early 2010s, the perception of furries was that all furries were weird. Now, while some furries have done some weird things, don't eat the pizza in the con hall, the internet only likes to focus on the weird and bad things. A lot of media, news, and documentaries around the furry fandom often describe it as something closer to mental illness than something people do just for fun, which has definitely done a lot of damage to people's perception. So when people think of the Sonic fandom, their mind immediately goes to cringe. But I will admit, it's jarring to suddenly see Sonic inflation art. This is not in any means to be a shut up furries. Furries were definitely not to blame for the Sonic fandom being weird by any stretch, but at the time, it was kind of the norm to blame furries for the weird stuff, and there was a lot of weird stuff done by furries. And Sonic being a series about sentient furry critters, the court of internet public opinion does what it does best, and jumps to the random, negative, and weird ones, ignoring all the good and positive stories just to make an assumption on something that goes against the grain. With the catastrophe of Sonic.Exe behind them, a lot of casual Sonic fans would forget Sonic existed outside of a handful of commercials or just a passing conversation. But behind the curtain of the internet, the fandom thrived. With platforms like YouTube becoming more popular along with other blog sites, a lot more discussion of Sonic would occur. A lot of content creators would come out just to start debates, to engage with fellow fans and build communities. But one person would damage the fandom as a whole way worse than Sonic.Exe ever did. Chris Chan. If you don't know who Chris Chan is, I made a speedrun of the major events in the lore of this phenomenon, so go check that out, it's on the screen. Long story short, Chris loved Pokemon and Sonic, and for a project at school combined them to make the accursed Sonichu. This would go on to be Chris's Mary Sue character in a long-running comic they still are trying to make today. To say Chris was problematic to the fanbase was an understatement. After the discovery of Chris Chan on the internet for a very long time would automatically assume things like this is what an average Sonic fan was. The fandom would take a very long time to recover. Sonic has always been a weird case, but now with people losing faith in Sega, an angry, frustrated fanbase, and public opinion of what fans were like, it kind of began to corrupt Sonic. It changed a lot of what people would post, and I think here is where a major turning point happened. Post-06, post-Chris Chan, we had a reckoning. Weird things had always existed in the franchise. Not just in the games, but the fan-made things were starting to get weird now too. But now, people were starting to view Sonic a little differently. Like, the idea of Sonic itself had become as glitchy and buggy as some of the games. Sonic became something weirder. Darker, even. The fandom had entered a weird phase in this distortion, and at the center of this creepiness and surreal dreamlike oddities was Sonic.Exe. In the 2010s, creepypastas were hitting their apex. A popular genre of early creepypastas was the corrupted childhood creepypastas. Fake lost media stories showing popular nostalgic characters doing something horrific. Ben Drowned, Dead Bart, and Squidward Suicide were the ones that stood out most during this time. One called Sonic.Exe fit into this category perfectly. At first, it gained traction through creepypasta reading channels like Mr. Creepypasta. The story is not great. It essentially goes someone acquires a creepy Sonic bootleg game, and all the iconic Sonic characters are killed off one by a corrupted evil Sonic, eventually ending with the evil Sonic saying, "I am God." Yeah, it's really bad. The quality of it is poor. Several cliches and tropes put together to the point where it seemed almost like parody. It was actually so poorly written that it was taken off the creepypasta website due to lack of quality. After some fan games were made, Markiplier would do a playthrough on these and popularize it.
I like this game.
EXE would become a genre on its own, usually following the same formula as Sonic. For some reason, kids loved Sonic.Exe, despite it being absolutely trash. To outsiders, it looked like yet another weird Sonic thing, which didn't help the fandom's already fragile public image. It did, however, attract a lot of new fans, a lot of them younger fans, usually from the Five Nights at Freddy's, Roblox, and Friday Night Funkin' communities. They loved Sonic.Exe, and it made a sudden shift in how the fandom was perceived. With a newer, younger audience, content creators and eager content farms would go out of their way to make YouTube brainrot videos featuring Sonic.Exe. For a time, EXE was everywhere, and even the dreaded J Station would try to cash in on its popularity.
What is poppin', guys? Back with another 3 a.m. challenge. It is finally here.
Despite the new gory approach to Sonic, the fandom was actually growing from this. Tons of Sonic fans, new and old, came to the franchise thanks to the EXE universe. The darker, edgier Sonic was an appeal that got a lot of people over, and regardless of the reason why, it was nice to see the fandom grow. Now, make no mistake, the OC civil wars were still going on at the time, but soon, old school fans, modern fans, OC creators, Deviantart fans, and even the EXE fans would put all their animosity aside and unite against a common enemy. Years pass, and the franchise's community grows. A lot of the cringe is but a distant memory, or just became memes. People forget, and time moves on. At least until 2019. April 30th, 2019, Paramount releases the first trailer for their live-action Sonic the Hedgehog. And, oh boy.
It's just an ordinary crabby. Oh my goodness!
It felt like they used a fan art template for his design. Temu Sonic had an uncanny valley-like appearance that looked like some dude in a suit or just a bipedal raccoon with mange. The overall internet exploded. It was a PR nightmare for Paramount. They were being publicly dragged all over for this universally hated design. A couple days after the backlash, however, director Jeff Fowler tweeted the following: "Thank you for the support and the criticism. The message is loud and clear. You aren't happy with the design, and you want changes. It's going to happen. Everyone at Paramount and Sega are fully committed to making this character the best he can be." In an extremely rare moment, the studio had listened to the fans. The backlash had become so large, so relentless, and so public that the studio had to respond. The fandom had successfully bullied them to make sure that our Hedgehog hero was faithful and on reveal was a universally loved character. The movie ended up actually doing quite well. The first one grossed $320 million worldwide and spawned 2 sequels, giving proof that when the Sonic fandom works together, amazing things can happen. The state of the fandom is tricky to pin down, at least in modern day. Yeah, it's weird, sometimes creepy and usually eccentric, but that's what makes it creative. Yes, there is weird fetish material, but that's kind of true for any fandom, especially ones with anthropomorphic characters. There's Pokemon Rule 34, Disney Rule 34, Five Nights at Freddy's Rule 34, so fetish material is kind of the natural progression for fandom at this point. The reason I think it is so readily available, or at least known by the upper parts of the internet and memed on, is a couple reasons. It was out there on early internet and available for a lot of kids, especially ones who had very little adult supervision. The furry culture latching on and creating fan art of it, combined with blossoming adolescences and easy-to-draw anthro characters, combined with internet anonymity, made for an ideal environment for this inevitable fetish boom to occur. The fan community is weird, make no mistake. But it's not weird because it's broken, sick, or something completely messed up. It's weird because it's alive. It's one of the first and few communities that didn't just consume media, but made its own. Even when the games were notoriously bad and sucked, the fans stuck around. They made their own stories. They built fan games and reshaped the franchise from the outside in. The cringe, the drama, the chaos, from OCs to bizarre Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic the Hedgehog toilet art, it was a fandom that actually thrived on chaos. Sonic became more than just a speedy boy. He became a canvas, something to figure out identity, expression, and figure out who you are even when you didn't fit in anywhere else. When I first started this video, I went in with LOL funny inflation, look how weird Sonic is. But after a bit, I was reminded how even though it gets weird, I love this series. Sonic was one of my first fan obsessions, and I still have a mountain of Archie comics by Ken Penders, which is a topic I'll cover one day, and I love every second of it. Even though I took a break after high school of being a fan, it was cool when I came back to a gigantic rabbit hole that I got to jump down and see how much it's grown, evolved, and remained beloved. So, here's to all the weirdos, artists, OC story writers, pixel artists, furries, bloggers, speed painters, creators, and fans. Stay weird, don't ever change. And as always, cheers. Thank you for sticking around to the end. If you did, I really appreciate it. I'm your gorgeous host, the Lorelock, bringing you more lore you didn't ask for. Stay tuned for more weirdness, and make sure to follow me on socials. If you give me a like, comment, or sub, I'd really appreciate it, you beautiful people, you. And as always, cheers. Also, fuck AI art. Holy God, there was so much when I was researching all this.